Hello, everyone. Today I've got Rich Cooper to talk about his most recent book, Top Shelf Man. That is the second installment of the Unplugged Alpha series. I really enjoyed the first one when it came out. I got the audiobook, listened to it 4 times, and I'm really excited for this to come out on audiobook pretty soon. Rich, welcome to the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me again, Mike.
I appreciate you taking the time. Would you be so kind as to go ahead and give my audience a quick introduction of who you are?
Sure. Had a long career as an entrepreneur and decided to exit it, become a content creator, I guess a YouTuber. I don't know. Mostly by accident. I was recording car videos for my YouTube channel, Entrepreneurs in Cars. Ran out of friends with cool cars to interview and was reading the comments one day, and people were asking questions about insight to deal with the relationships and marriage and divorce and stuff like that. And started answering questions around those topics and kind of brought me to this wheelhouse that I'm operating in now. It's one of those stories of making your wounds your work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Now, out of curiosity, you had such a fantastic first book. What inspired you to write a second one?
You kind of learn things along the way, don't you? You know, as life sort of throws curveballs and lessons and stuff. And I think it's good to continue learning as an individual, but at the same time teaching, you know, the new things that you learn. And, you know, I've told a few people this. I think the first book, you know, it's a good general piece to sort of talk about the landscape that men find such a challenge with today. But the second book goes way deeper down the rabbit hole. And in my opinion, you know, sequels don't usually sell as well as the original blockbuster sort of thing. But I think it's a far better book for guys that really want to get better results, especially over the long term when it comes to women and relationships and stuff like that.
Yeah, I did notice that there was a bit of a change in your focus where a lot of your first book had a lot to do with more the common short-term games that we see very common in red pill spaces. Whereas I see that this book had a lot more focus on proper vetting from a green flag perspective instead of a red flag perspective. And then a lot of talk about long-term relationships and maintaining order over the long term.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what would you say is like the overall thesis or the thrust that you wanted to get across to men in this book?
I think if you were to find one main lesson, it's going to be built around managing frame and a long-term relationship, making sure that you get the most out of it. Because I think guys really, really struggle with that over the long term. They find that women's desire sort of tanks a lot faster than men's does, that they end up giving more over time and getting less back in return. There's a lot of frustrated guys that are in long-term committed relationships, marriages, whatever you want to call them, where they're even in a sexless position where they're really not getting any kind of intimacy from their wife or their girlfriend over a period of time. And I think there's certain things that you can do to improve that and manage that a lot better as a guy that never really gets talked about. It's unfortunate because these things aren't that far beneath the surface. It's like an iceberg, right? You only see the tip. I think the first book was more of the tip, just the tip. But the second one kind of goes a lot deeper, you know, below the waterline and sort of explores those other areas that really add a ton of benefit to a guy's lives if they're willing to listen to it and follow it.
Yeah, absolutely. I also noticed that one of the things that you hit on specifically early on in this book was the idea of wealth generation. And I think that generally speaking, men, unless they come from wealth or unless they come from a family that knows a thing or two about money, do not have a clear concept of these different pathways to wealth. What takeaway would you give to the general man in a quick snippet as far as what pathways are best available to men currently in our environment?
I think overall the best that I prefer, and of course I'm a little, you know, biased in this sense and regard because I was an entrepreneur for so many years and still am, is still entrepreneurship. But there's 5 other wealth creation methods that are really, really important for guys to understand. C-suite jobs, licensed professionals, those that command an audience, like athletes, musicians, you know, stuff like that. Guys that are in high-end sales, they sell very expensive real estate, yachts, you know, jets, things like that. And of course, STEM. Most guys don't follow those paths. They'll sort of just kind of fall into something because it's what family told them to do, or maybe historically what people around them thought was a generally good idea or a general life path or career to follow. But we live in an era today where it's actually probably the easiest at any time in history to make true life-changing wealth, and also have an impact on people's lives, and make sure that that value that you generate and create can be spread equally and evenly as far as wide as possible, because of the internet and mobile phones, and now with AI sort of playing a big role in that. But most guys just get a job, and job is an acronym. JOB stands for just over broke. And most guys find themselves in a scenario where they're just living paycheck to paycheck. There's more month at the end of the money. There's fights between them and their wife or girlfriend over money. They don't know how to make life-changing money. They just kind of do what they've always been told to do, and you're always going to get what you have gotten in the past if you just follow that path, unfortunately. There's nothing wrong with a job. I just think that if you really want to go through this life and have a good kick at it and have a really good experience at it, having access to serious wealth is a store of value. That's all that money is. It's a store of value. The more value that you create in the world, the more that you store. And you can apply it to yourself and your family to improve yourself and their lives as well too. So I think it's a great thing for guys to try to achieve and strive for.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think a lot of men fail to recognize that for the most part, their level of compensation is directly correlated to the level of problems they solve in society.
Yeah.
And when we go ahead and talk to other wealthy men, a lot of times we're talking about solving our own problems, and solving each other's problems is a great way of networking. Because if you're working on a deal with an apartment complex or something like that, and you want to talk to other skilled investors that have been through that before. I mean, real estate was the way that I had made my way in life, but I had been given the standard blueprint of go get a stable job, save a little bit. And it wasn't until I was 20 years old and I read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad that I thought more was available to me than the blueprint that was provided to me.
Yeah.
What caused you to think differently about your journey?
I like fast cars. I've always been a petrol head, and I like exotic cars. So if you're going to go out there and get some, you're going to need to create some value and make some money. So, I needed to solve my own problem. I didn't want to take a bus. I've taken the bus. It sucks. I didn't want to drive a crappy car because I've driven crappy cars and they suck. I like doing cool things with cool people. And that means you're going to have to go out there and do a little bit more than what the average guy is willing to do if you want to get that. So that was really my drive. It was just like, I've just always been a petrol head, man. Like I like engineering. I like fast planes, I like boats, things like that. So, for me to go out there and, get off the buses and not sit at the bus stop like I was at 16, looking at these nice cars drive by me while I was waiting for a lift to my part-time job, making $3.75 an hour as a young man. I had to figure that out. And, I just leaned into probing and asking questions and reading books and biographies and stuff like that.
I think it's really funny. One of my supervisors, when I was still in the Air Force, he had mentioned that him and I learned different lessons from the game of Monopoly. He had learned that he liked the car, and he was really into cars and all of that. And he said that I knew the lessons of what the game was actually about. And so when I went ahead and retired from the Air Force and went full-time into real estate, him and I stayed in touch. And he has, he's got a fair measure of wealth for what he's done, but he does have great cars. And cars aren't really a big thing for me, but I definitely understand where people would go ahead and come about to that. Now, you were in debt consolidation, and debt relief was the first business that you blew up. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Credit card debt settlement.
So how did you find that to be a uniquely available option for you?
So I was working in third-party collections with Canada's biggest collection agency. They gave me a package because I disagreed with my boss at one point 6-8 months ago. And that's where I learned the lesson. They hire you for your resume and they fire you for fit. So when it was time to give out a package, and I talk about that in my first book, I got canned for fit. They gave me 15 grand. I went home and I just tried to figure out what I was going to do. And I remember doing interviews and entertaining other opportunities. I'm like, it's just the same thing. It's going to be like the next flavor of crap, essentially. And I've always wanted to take a stab at entrepreneurship. And I had this skill set that I learned from the third-party collection world, which was negotiating between the creditor and debtor. So I applied it by going directly to the consumer and figured out internet marketing, pay-per-click ads in the early days with Google were super cheap. They were working excellent, like really, really well. That kind of changed into meta ads, with Facebook. and the like with YouTube pre-rolls and things like that. And, we did real well and the business blew up. We're doing close to $300,000 a month at one point, several thousand clients. It was a tough struggle for the first, I would say, year to 2 years, and nothing was easy along the way. There was always a struggle. There was always a challenge. I mean, one of the things I tell entrepreneurs all the time, or the want to be entrepreneurs, the wantrepreneurs, is, they always ask, well, what's the most important skill? And I tell them the same thing all the time, is problem solving. You have to know how to solve problems, and you have to be willing to work hard at getting to an answer and not giving up and being relentless and that sort of stuff. And I think that's an important life skill for all men to master, because nobody likes a quitter, at the end of the day. So that was a drive for me there.
Yeah, I find that it's interesting that a lot of men want to do these things, but then they fail to recognize just how much cost they have to go ahead and put up front. And I find that most often with building a business out, the first couple of years are by far the hardest, because you're going from 0 to 1. And I think that it's a lot easier to improve upon a system that you already have in place that's profitable, rather than building one up from scratch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you were building yourself up in that process, what would you say is probably the biggest lesson in terms of leadership that you gained along that process?
Managing people, man, I would say, which is interesting because I got really good at it. And we got awards for company culture, and we just had a great sort of employee structure put together. But at this point in my life, to this day, I more or less advocate for a company of one. I don't think you need a lot of employees. I think there's a lot of disadvantages to employees. I think a lot of the effort that you put into hiring, retaining, attracting top shelf talent, the juice really isn't really worth the squeeze as much as it used to be. And I think a lot of those processes can either be automated, outsourced, or run through AI. There's different ways that you can handle it today. But I think if you're real specific about the kind of business that you want, and you engineer it from the ground up, like you blueprint it from the ground up so that you don't need a lot of employees, I think you're better off today. But back in the early days for me, to your original question, it was like managing HR, because that was probably the most important thing to making sure the business was profitable and running smoothly.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how nowadays we can go ahead and make higher margin businesses having fewer employees, because payroll is typically the number one expense on most companies' books. But the idea of developing leadership is just one of those things that is useful in a man's life across the board. And it just so happens that their work and building out a business is usually the primary incubator for learning leadership. What are some of the other things that you would say would be a better place to learn how to be a leader if building out a business with people is not so much a thing to focus on anymore?
As far as running your own business, you mean?
Well, I mean, developing as a leader, just generally speaking, as a man, right? Because those are different. It's the same general skill set that's applied in different contexts. I've come to notice.
I mean, there's a few different areas of life I think that guys can sort of lean into, which we've kind of moved away from. Physical challenges, like combat sports. I think everybody should be competent at throwing hands and learning how to fight. It's not just a useful skill in case you ever need it to protect yourself or your family or the people that you love, but it's also amazing exercise. There's amazing people in the room often. And it's something that you'll be able to take with you for a long time in your life. And women find it attractive too. I mean, women love lethal men. Doing difficult things, doing, challenges. I mean, I did this cast the other night on this study that I came across that was done in New Zealand about toxic masculinity. And you keep hearing this term like toxic masculinity, and men are so toxic. And, they found out that less than 3.3% of men, actually fall into that toxic masculinity category. But it was interesting to look at the 8 qualifiers that they were using, and they were talking about things like men having a preference for hierarchical situations, amongst men. And it's like, that's one of the qualifiers that they're trying to steal from us, right? Because they want everybody to have a participation ribbon. They don't want men to compete, right? And what's interesting about that is men have always competed throughout history. It's men compete, women choose, right? Like that's just how things work. They win at the finish line and they pick the winners. They don't care about men's struggles. So it's like, even in these modern times, like they're trying to rob men of the ability to compete and to challenge themselves. And if they do it, then it's under the guise of, oh, well, if you're a competitive man or you like hierarchies or you like a pecking order, then there's something wrong with you and you're a toxically masculine man. So I think ignoring a lot of those mainstream narratives and getting out there and doing difficult things, riding motorcycles, challenge yourself, doing athletic pursuits, getting out in the sun, getting your steps in, just, small things like this, picking up heavy stuff, putting it down, taking on the challenges of extra hours, more work, a side hustle, your own business. There's lots of things that guys can do. Just do something that challenges you. And that doesn't mean video games. I don't think leveling yourself up with a virtual character to go and get the next level of armor or the better sword or whatever it is in particular video games that a lot of guys, pursue today while you're fat and out of shape sitting in the chair. Great. You're doing really well in your virtual world and you've got stacks of virtual gold or virtual money and the best armor and you can beat up anybody. But if you're not competent and resourceful in the real world, take that time that you're using, which I would call wasting on leveling up that video game character, to level up the individual behind the keyboard.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting how so many men will put so many hours into something that has no tangible benefit for themselves in their life.
Yeah.
But they use it as a sedative to kind of ignore the realities of life, I find a lot of times.
Yep. Well, guys inherently want to compete, so they're going to do it somewhere. And I think if you give them an outlet to do it in a video game, I think that's a close enough approximation of the reality of being successful at something, although it's virtual, so it doesn't really matter, if we can put it that way.
Sure. Well, it's interesting that you bring up the idea of a hierarchical order is something that they taught, or they were bringing up in this study as some element as to toxicity in terms of toxic masculinity. And you mentioned how men have always operated in hierarchies. Mm-hmm. And we have pyramid-shaped hierarchies, and it's typical across the world, no matter what culture you look at, for men. Yeah. But for women, their hierarchies are often flat.
Yeah.
And when someone gets out of line, then all the other women of the sisterhood go ahead and attack that person, call them a pick-me or whatever, because they're trying to step out of line and put themselves in a better position to be picked.
Yeah.
And I think that's crazy how these women do that, but it's a matter of solidarity from them, I believe, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And like, women love competitive men. There's absolutely no question about it. Women love competitive men. Women love successful men. Women love guys that are competent, resourceful, and develop renown for themselves. So it's actually hilarious that you see these studies now where they're discouraging or they're marking competitive behaviors as toxic now, as if women shouldn't like them, or they shouldn't, or these behaviors shouldn't appeal to women, when they do. And they always have, throughout history. Women don't want to pick losers. They want to pick winners. So again, it's men compete, women choose. That's how it works.
Yeah. And it's interesting because dominance and competence hierarchies for the longest time have served as filtering and sorting mechanisms so that women can choose the winners.
Yeah.
And yet now they're trying to go ahead and shame that quality in women, but they're not going to shame things like promiscuity and other things that are going to be more damaging to women over the long term.
No, that's empowering now, apparently.
At least temporarily. Now, You hit on this idea of combat sports and being in the right rooms. You have a whole chapter devoted to finding your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think holds men back, generally speaking, from seeking and forging quality relationships with other men?
That's interesting. I think there's a lot of external factors through the nurture of boys into men that soften them, it weakens them, it discourages them. And a lot of them are all beta male factories. And that's why we have so many soft plugged in beta males today. Be agreeable, be nice, stop picking on so-and-so, you're not allowed to bully people anymore. You're not allowed to, go outside and challenge yourself and do difficult things. Don't pop a wheelie on your bicycle. You might get hurt, sort of thing. Like, they want to bubble wrap everybody. They don't want to give people awards for excellence, for beating out their competition. It's not everybody gets a participation ribbon. So everything with society, culture, Hollywood, music, it's not generally encouraging the pursuit of excellence. It just isn't. And I think that's why we get these softer, more compliant type of beta males. There's a lot of environmental factors too, right? Like there's, give you an example of one that everybody has the exposure to if they're not paying attention to it is tap water. There's environmental estrogen mimicking compounds that are in tap water that essentially turn men soft. It gives them kind of like a fat accumulation around the waist. It gives them the female breast tissue sort of thing. A lot of women are on birth control. They go to the bathroom, they urinate, it goes through the septic system, they clean out all the particles, like all the poo and everything like that, but they can't clean out hormones, or they can clean out hormones. They know the hormones, that the estrogen hormones are in the water, but the water treatment facilities, which are again run by the state, by the government, they don't clean out the hormones. They only clean out the contaminant. You're gonna have to cut that out. Contaminants.
The bad stuff. They cut out
the bad stuff. How about that? But anyway,
Yeah.
but they're allowing the hormones to remain in the water, and they know it's there. And I know this because the doctor that wrote the book on the topic, Dr. Anthony J., the book's called Estrogeneration. He had visited a lot of the water treatment plants and asked them if they knew about the estrogen in the water and why they're not taking it out. And they're just like, we're just not instructed to. We don't have the means, we don't have the UV treatment. We don't have the 5-step reverse osmosis sort of setup for all that sort of stuff. So any guy that's drinking water, that's boiling their pasta in like tap water and stuff like that, that's not properly filtered, is drinking estrogen. And that's why you get a lot of estrogen dominant males today. You see them walking around with bitch tits and a fat belly, and like they're just misplaced. They don't look like men anymore. It's funny because when you go back to the old school, gym training sort of videos from like the 50s and 60s, you see every guy is lean, somewhat muscular, very low body fat, and extremely capable, and they're all running through all these obstacle courses. And it's not a military training camp, it's like a school. You can see clearly that it's a school, and they can all meet the minimum requirements. Now today you see these kind of fat kids waddling around and they can barely make it through stuff like this, and they're just like, he's winded, just let him have a seat now, sort of thing. So we don't challenge kids anymore. We don't put them through all of those difficulties that we used to.
Yeah, it's interesting because it reminds me of 1984. You ever read that book?
Oh yeah. We all have by this point.
So the first time that they introduced the proletariat, they call them the proles, and the way that they describe them is kind of how you're describing modern men in a lot of ways. They're like hunched over beetle people that have like too much fat accumulation and all of that, and they're engineered that way so that they don't actively resist the state.
Yep.
And I wonder if there isn't an indirect relationship there.
I mean, they certainly don't seem to like strong masculine men. They like them in the military when they can get them to fight wars. I mean, that's ideal. But in times of peace and in times of public where the state wants to run the discourse of society, they need soft, agreeable men. And every piece of, media that you see come, it's like every day it's some new level of crap that comes out. The other day it was Gavin Newsom's wife talking about men being toxically masculine, and we have to modify and filter and censor the media that they're able to consume, and the government has to get in blah blah blah. It's the same story all the time, right? If we don't protect our boys from toxically masculine characters like Andrew Tate and the like, they're all going to turn into these evil men that are going to be like, rapists and things like this. And it's just like absolutely not true. There's always going to be a contingent of crappy men out there that will do crappy things. But the vast majority of men have the capability to be good men and also be good at being men.
Well, I mean, I imagine if we go ahead and look back 20, 30 years at the kind of literature that people were reading in school, we were talking about the Iliad, the Odyssey, stories of men of renown and men who put in the work and did like some really dirty things to achieve great results. And we don't have respect for that in our society anymore in a lot of ways.
Nope.
We want to bubble wrap people like you had mentioned earlier, but all that does is insulate people from exercising the muscle of taking measured risk.
Yep, absolutely.
And the tough thing is, when you have a society that is incapable of taking measured risk, you end up with a society that's looking to degenerate over time because nobody's truly creating anything at that point.
Correct. Yeah.
So what do you see as the most significant warning signs for ego and drama among other men when they are looking for quality friendships?
Well, With the topic of ego, I don't have an issue with ego. I think that ego has been taken out of context. I remember there was a book written a few years ago called "Ego is the Enemy," and I
Mhm.
like Ryan Holiday's books for the most part. But I got through like a third of that book, and I'm like, this is crap, and I put it down because I think that you have to have, as a guy, you have to have a certain amount of ego to you. I think you have to be somewhat narcissistic. I know that people like to point at guys and be, oh, he's narcissistic, so all my exes are toxic and they're all narcissistic. And it's like you have to have a certain degree of narcissism to believe in yourself to go and do the work. So I think that that needs to exist to a degree. There's got to be something behind it. Like you have to have the capabilities to somewhat match that ego. It's okay if the ego is somewhat in excess of the capabilities. Maybe the capabilities will fill in. But with respect to drama, I don't think men should have any patience or any space for a lot of drama. There's a lot of guys today that manufacture a lot of drama, like amongst themselves. They're always infighting, straw manning each other. There's a lot of ad hom attacks on each other, and it's like I don't see a lot of the criticism coming from people that are worthy of dispensing criticism, if you know what I mean. Like I've often said that hate only ever comes from beneath. Nobody ever gets jealous of a loser.
Right.
And a lot of the times, you'll see these social media accounts and they got nothing better to do with their time. So they use these like sock puppet, straw man, sort of anon type of accounts, just to go and say mean things to try to get under people's skin. And I don't know how many of these accounts are run by bots or what they are exactly, but it's like, I've gotten to the point where for the most part, unless it's somebody that I follow or they've got a blue check mark and it's a known account, I don't even read comments anymore because it's almost not even worthwhile to sort of engage in the drama because you will get sucked into it. It's not a good use of a man's time. Drama's for women. It's not for men.
Right. So why do you think so many men that are like on their climb up decide to use drama as a tool as opposed to just putting in the work?
Because it's easy. It's known to them and it's what's familiar. And they also follow women, right? Like women lead now everything. We live in a matriarchy. It's a gynocentric social order today. So men will often follow what women say and do. A really clear and relevant example of this today. And once I tell you this, I'm sorry that I'm going to ruin it for your audience, but the word partner or I feel like, and women will often say, well, I just feel like my past shouldn't matter and I'm not like that anymore. And yeah, sure, I've run through 50 guys, but that's not me today. Like I'm looking for something serious and I just feel like that's just me sort of thing. And that's fine. I mean, that's how women communicate. They communicate with their emotions. They often quote unquote feel like certain things. But you'll hear a lot of guys today and just listen for it now. And you hear a lot of guys open with, well, I just feel like, and they're just basically mimicking what they hear women say because they like these women and they want to sleep with them. So they think that if they echo the language and they follow their lead, that they'll also like these guys as well too. Partner is another good example of it. We've blurred the line between husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. And a lot of people just use the term partner because homosexuals used it, when they all came out of the closet 20, 30, 40 years ago, whatever it was. And they often use the term partner. You hear a lot of women and men today, use the term partner. It's like sometimes you'll see these Reddit posts on social media, and it's like you'll see the person write it, and it's like my partner did this, and then my partner did that, and it's like as you read it, you can't tell who the guy and the gal is in the story, right? Because they just want to blur the lines and they don't want to define the masculine versus the feminine. They don't want to define gender. They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or not use the correct pronoun, sort of thing like that. So I think that you have to get very, very clear and be very precise with your language when you're communicating today as a guy, if you want to signal that you are that guy.
Sure. I find that oftentimes men who have something of value to say will start lines with, I think,
Correct.
or I assess, or some cognitive thrust to their thought, as opposed to an emotional thrust to their thought.
Right.
And it's interesting when you talk about
thought.
Yes, sir. So it's interesting how you talk about partnership as part of the language. And I think this stems from the idea of blank slate equalism, where they try to get men and women to be functionally equivalent to each other in society. Though we recognize that a lot of women will say they want someone who is their equal, their revealed preferences are, in fact, that they are looking for a superior man,
100%.
almost ubiquitously.
Yeah.
And so they want to provide us with comforting lies so that we can go ahead and relax, as opposed to giving us the hard truth and say, hey, you might want to think about just leveling up and doing the things you need to do and disregard how a lot of these guys are going to cry about having to put in all the work.
Mm-hmm. Yep, 100%.
What do you think about that phenomenon? Because I see that all the time, is a lot of black pill doomers complaining about needing to do the work.
Yeah, I mean, I get the frustration. I can understand, the part of them where they say it's like the juice isn't worth the squeeze. A lot of women today just aren't really worth the effort. And they're right to some degree. I mean, I think the caliber of woman has gone down, dramatically. I think, my granddad probably got twice the woman for half the effort that most guys have to put in today, right? Today women are more disagreeable. They're more difficult. They've got more degrees. There's a lot more boss girls today. They're also been run through. They've shared their body with dozens and dozens of men by the time they find a committed relationship or move to marriage, or they find religion or something like that and kind of shift their focus. So it's a real problem. Yeah, there's no question about it. I think that guys need to raise their standards for what they accept into their lives, but I think they also need to raise their standards for themselves too. Like, everything you want is on the other side of raising your standards. If you're not happy with your life, if you're kind of black-pilled on the way the world's going, I mean, there's a lot of guys on the top shelf. Like the whole point of this new book, the Top Shelf Man, was really to demonstrate and explain to guys how guys that are living at the top shelf or in close proximity to it are getting all the results that they want out of life, with money and women and friendships and brotherhood and all that sort of stuff. And everything you're looking for is dressed in overalls and on the other side of work. So if you don't want to do the work, then you're going to get swept away with the 80% of the men out there that are all plugged in beta males, not getting what they want out of life, poor, insignificant, with no renown for themselves, with very little interest from women, or if any at all. It's unfortunate that guys pack in the towel and sort of just say, it's just not worth it. I mean, I sympathize with it, again, a little bit, but at the same time, I don't have time for a lot of quitters either too.
Yeah, I find that it's interesting that most average women have no interest in most average men.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes relatively little effort to be above average in our society right now.
Yeah.
Like, the average guy is overweight and not doing a whole lot and just over broke. So just improving yourself 10 or 20% is usually enough for you to differentiate yourself from the pack, and then at least get you going in the right direction where you can see the value of the wins that you're taking along the way. But a lot of guys aren't willing to put in that extra 10%.
Yeah.
So in the book, you also spend a good amount of time describing Becky. I know that a lot of times in your streams, you talk about an archetype of a woman called Becky.
Yeah.
Who is Becky?
Becky is a collection of many women. It's not just one woman. It's just an avatar that I use to describe in that chapter, which is the most common woman that most guys will come across if they're dealing with, I guess, chicks over the age of 27 plus, 27 to about 40, I would say, would be the Becky avatar. She's successful. She's professional. She's got a degree. She's got her own place. She's got her little fur babies, perfectly decorated apartment, 17 throw pillows on her bed, perfectly arranged every morning before she leaves, admires her amazing degrees on the wall, framed in mahogany. Sometimes she stares at them thinking that she wishes she could be mahogany, sort of thing. It's more of a comical chapter, and it's not at the same time, because it's also very truthful. And that's just sort of explaining to guys what the common sort of gal is that they're going to come across, what she looks like, how she's going to sort of walk and talk and sort of behave, and sort of explain to them what they're up against, and also why she's a really bad choice for most men as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, this is a very common archetype, like you've mentioned. What do you see coming up in the next 5 to 10 years with future generations of Beckys? Are they going to be any different than we've been seeing in the last 10 years?
I wish there was light at the end of the tunnel. I don't really see that much. I don't want to be a pessimist, but I don't see a lot of change. I know that there's a trend. There's almost a belief nowadays. Oh, women are changing. We've got these great conservative women. We've got these wonderful women that are, trying to lead the charge. And I think guys are completely missing the point. They see a pretty face with a low cut top, looking great, ripe and beautiful. And they don't understand female nature. They don't understand that women are women. They, for the most part, all operate using the same software, right? And they think that there's unicorns and there's these like perfect, uh, angels that they would love to replicate or try to find out there somewhere. And that's not the best way to approach it, because I see these guys get destroyed all the time. They'll get destroyed in divorce court. They'll get destroyed in breakup. They'll be betrayed, just like any other chick will have, betrayed the other guy that wasn't a right leaning, conservative sort of thing. I think you have to handle women and relationships like you do a pistol. You have to treat it as what it is, be respectful of it, know how it operates, and handle it accordingly, and take the preventative measures for yourself in your own life so you don't get hurt. And that's just the reality of it, for guys. There's a lot of guys walking around with these rose-colored glasses, loving a lot of these female content creators. And it's like, if these women were truly conservative and really not feminist and all about family, they turn off the microphones, they turn off the lights, and they would be at home raising the children and telling other women to do exactly the same. And you see very, very few of them do that. Most of them want the attention. They want the limelight. They want to put on the makeup. They want to get the likes in the comments. They want to drive the engagement for themselves. Women love attention. Attention is the coin of the realm in girl world, and women are now competing in men's spaces that were previously dominated by strong masculine males. They're now sort of moving into these spaces and saying a lot of the things that I've been saying for the last 10 years. Not giving credit, of course, and then trying to own that space and move into it. And when you read the comments from the guys following their stuff, they're mostly plugged in beta males. You see something like, "Oh my God, you're so beautiful. I hope one day that I can find a woman like you," sort of thing. And it's like, they're all the same. They're literally all the same. Like we saw this recently with the Sarah Stock, debacle with Elijah Schaefer. And it's like, oh, she was supposed to be this pristine, pure virgin woman saving herself for marriage, and she was banging Elijah the entire time that she was engaged to her husband up until the wedding, sort of thing. So you just have to understand it. Like even Jordan Peterson's daughter, she's an embarrassment as far as I'm concerned. The way that she's carried herself and all the activities that she's sort of indulged in over the last several years. There's no perfect women out there. You just have to understand who they are and what they're capable of and navigate accordingly. But again, back to the point, if women truly want to offer some value in this space, turn off the mics, turn off the cameras, be a wife, support his mission, build a family, turn a house into a home, sort of thing, and tell other women to do the exact same thing. Turn off the mics and turn off the cameras. Let the guys handle it. The guys got it from this point on. Men will teach other men how to be men. Women can't teach men how to be men. We've tried this experiment for decades now. The vast majority of parents, it's single parent households, like 43%. And they don't say single mother households, but that's what it is, because women get 80% of the custody. And it's not working. Single moms turn boys into beta males. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that so much pathology comes from single mother households. And yet we go ahead and continue to push the tender year doctrine and all of this, where we try to get the kids with the mom, as opposed to back in the day where the kids would go to the dad. And that's how it used to be for such an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And then now we're like, well, let's go ahead and make sure that the kids are with their mom because they need the love and care and support. And then we see over the last 50, 60 years, just how bad that has been for society. And are we interested in changing that right now? Well, sure. Kentucky has changed their law back in 2018 with default custody going to 50-50. That's a good step in the right direction.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that, be ubiquitous if it's not going to be default to the man for the most part.
Yeah. And you don't see the state changing legislation and laws in that direction on a large scale. It's done in like very small pockets here and there by more conservative type of leadership. I think you need to get women out of politics. I think you need to get women out of leadership roles. I think you need to get women out of things like firefighting and policing and the military. There's certain things that women are really good at, and there's certain things that men are really good at. And if you want to see real change going forward, there's gotta, I hate to say it, but they need to surrender to the men. They need to trust that the men got it, that they care about women, that we're going to put what's in the best interest of the family and the household first. And sure, that might mean that there's going to be some crappy men out there that are going to get away with certain things that we're not going to like. But that's kind of a consequence of making sure that the authority, that the decisions that men make stick, right? Like they have some, they have some grip to them, sort of thing. World's not perfect, and we've gone in this direction over several decades where it's just like, the female first primary social order has been trying to correct certain pockets of things that are kind of crappy, and they've just kept going, and it's turned into a supremacist movement where women basically run men. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and it's interesting in so many ways where even in a marriage, right? Guys will screw up. We screw up all the time on a regular basis, especially as we're learning how to get things together. And we have to have that room to fail and to figure it out and pick ourselves up and get down the field. Mm-hmm. And it seems like our society is not content to allow men the margin to have that risk of failing, because we're too afraid to let people fail, generally speaking.
Sure.
Like we're so over invested in people's emotions. And to tie into your earlier point about how so many of these female commentators, they claim to be conservative on the outside, but once you go ahead and give them any pushback, it's real quick that you find out that they're just covert feminists in the first place.
Yeah, there it is. There's the feminist, right? It always shows up every single time.
Sure. And the thing is, you're so right that as men, we should be leading society, and we should be doing the things that need to be done to get things down the field, so to speak. But it seems that at every turn, we're cut at our kneecaps to go ahead and stop that.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the biggest point of value that gentlemen like the two of us can provide to society is, hey, it's okay to level up and not worry about the feelings of others as much as the results that we're getting, and figuring out how to do these things in pro-social manners so that we can all be benefiting in the long term. Yeah. But I think so many people are so locked in on short-term thinking, mostly because I think that most people are locked into short-term thinking just by how they operate in life. Most of them are just over broke or below that. And so they have no vision for something 3 to 6 months down the road, let alone years or generations down the road.
Yeah.
And it isn't until you get success and have a measure of wealth that you start thinking generations down the line, like what is going to happen in 10, 15, 20, 30 years that we could be setting people up for success now.
Correct. Fully agree.
I remember like fathers and families, generally speaking, back in the day, they'd be concerned with, hey, when their daughter got married, there would be a dowry involved so that the family can go ahead and have a foundation. And usually there'd be a match between what the potential of the guy was and what the woman brought to the table. And we were actually talking about what people bring to the table. Whereas now, if you just ask a woman what she brings to the table, the vast majority of them just flip the heck out because they have no idea how to accurately answer the question in a way that looks good for them without bringing in all these feminist tropes that end up devaluing themselves to the men that they want to attract.
Yeah, it's wild. It's a crazy world we live in today.
Sure. So let's move on to another topic where in the last book, you had a chapter that was devoted to 21 red flags. And that was kind of like the lead magnet that you would use for a long time. In this book, you have kind of like the counterpart to that, where you're talking about green flags.
Yeah.
Now, you went ahead and highlighted a bright triad of 3 traits: clarity, emotional maturity, and stability. What are some of the best ways for a guy who's on his game to be able to kind of test the waters to get this stuff to the surface so he can actually take a look at that and determine whether or not she possesses these characteristics?
Yeah, and that sort of follows in that chapter as well, with some examples that illustrate the bright triad traits with the other green flags. I think there's 16 green flags in there. I don't recall them all off the top of my head, but one of them that sort of stands out is, what does she do when you get sick, right? Like, does she disappear? Does she become busy? Or does she put down what she's doing to come and look after you, nurture you back to health, sort of thing? Because I think that's a strong sign of a good woman that's good at being a woman that wants to be a complement to your life and is there for the long haul. I've been in both situations where I've been sick and I've seen women just like drop everything to make sure that I'm absolutely fine. And I've also been ghosted, at the same time, when I thought there was a woman in my life that I could call upon if I was sick. So I think it's a really good test, with that one example to sort of talk about. And, don't, like you just don't ignore these things, right? You want to look for women that are good women that want to add some value to your life. And a lot of guys it's like the first girl that talks to them, the first girl that starts to respond to their text, the first girl that touches their pee-pee, the first girl that will say yes to a wedding proposal is the one that they pick without doing adequate vetting. I think a lot of the problems that guys run into with long-term relationships can be resolved in the selection process by making sure that they only select a decent woman to invite into their life when they ask for his commitment. The problem is, therein as well, is a lot of guys don't have a lot of optionality. They don't have much of a pool to select from. And the key to having a good pool to select from is being very attractive and being very valuable. And the more attractive you are and the more valuable you are, the better the pool will look to you that you can select from. So you can move away from the red flags and, get more of the green flags that are going to make your life better.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how earlier on in the conversation, you're like, there's no such thing as unicorns. Well, there isn't really, because in a lot of ways, they can have a lot of these green flags, but every man is still going to have preferences and desires and his own program to invite her on to join. And it isn't until he trains her in the way that he would want her to be that she becomes like the most excellent version of herself for him.
Right.
Does that make a lot of sense?
Yeah. And she'll only be willing to do all of those things. She'll only be willing to put up with your boundaries and your crap and the things that you might do or say that she may not like, or she may want you to stop doing if she absolutely adores you, right? Like if she doesn't adore you, if she doesn't look at you as her hypergamous best option, you're going to say something like, hey, I got sick. I need you to, pick me up some chicken soup, and my dry cleaning needs to get taken care of, and the kids got to get shuttled here by this date. And she's like, yes, anything else I can do to help you out, right? Versus, just ghosting you and I'm busy. I'm not your slave, which is what most guys will typically get in a long-term committed relationship is, oh, just man up, you man cold, stop being such a baby. I'm not your slave, sort of thing. That's what most guys get today now.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that for top shelf guys, like the women fail to recognize that submission is often a cheat code, right? If they were to go ahead and be willing to surrender their will to a good man that's in their life that is doing all these hard things to provide a great life for them and has himself together, that oftentimes her submitting to us makes us want to take care of her more, which is the paradoxical thing.
Yeah, it's also a twofold problem though, because there's a lack of men that women would see worthy as submitting to. So that's one part of the problem. I would say 85% of women will just dismiss, or they're mostly invisible to them. And then the other part of the problem is the remaining guys that are top shelf that should be submitted to and followed and adored, by the women that love them. They don't always want to submit to a guy, right? Like I remember, a really good example of this is Danica Patrick. She was a race car driver, GoDaddy girl, all that sort of stuff. I was on her podcast a couple of years ago. She had read my first book and, she wanted to talk, and it was a really interesting conversation. The interview's out there on the internet somewhere. And she said something to me during the interview, like, well, don't guys want a challenge? Like, don't they want a strong, independent sort of woman? I'm like, no, we don't want to be out putting out fires all day and then come home to your crap, where you start to, just henpeck us down to like nothingness. A lot of women don't understand how to submit to a man because they didn't do it with their fathers. They didn't do it with their older brothers. They either didn't get adequate advice from their father growing up, or he wasn't around, or if adequate advice was given, she didn't follow it. Right. So there's that problem too. So that's where a lot of the difficulty lies in a lot of modern relationships today as well too. And it's tough. Again, the answer to all of this for most guys is not trying to like fix something that's broken. Well, how do I repair it? Maybe I can rebuild this V8 and fix it with a better sort of system. That's how most guys think. Like we like to fix things. It's a mindset that's been called the Captain Save-A-Hose sort of mentality. And I think the best thing for guys to do is like you have to have more optionality. And you cultivate that by being as attractive as you can be and as being as valuable as you can be. And that way you're in a position to just say no to women that don't complement your life. It's very simple.
Yeah, I think there's few things that keep women in line as much as other women being in the picture does.
That's an unfortunate reality. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book. I mean, you want to be attractive to women, then one of the surest ways of doing that is having the company or being found attractive by other attractive women. Like women want what other women want. The easiest way for women to sort of establish and size up the value of a man is the proximity of other beautiful women around that guy, And right. It's funny because, one of the first things women try to do when they get into a committed relationship with a guy is completely remove all of their women. Just get rid of all the competition. And it's like, and then they wonder why the guy they just locked down is not that attractive to her like 4 or 5 years down the road because she eliminated all the other options. He said, okay, no problem.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's useful, no matter what the context that you're operating in, to not close the door completely on that.
Yeah.
Because it's just one of those things where if they get too comfortable being the monopoly supplier of intimacy, then that ends up causing so many problems, because that's the main source of the henpecking, is they use that as the carrot and the stick at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah. No, it's really true, man, because they hate the idea, but they also subconsciously love it too. There's nothing that turns a woman on more than like, it's why wedding bands don't repel women. If you're an attractive man and you have a wedding band, a woman would rather share a married guy than be with a faithful loser. That's just the reality of women's mate choice, selection. That's just how they operate. That's just how they think.
Yeah, and it's almost like it's been that way for thousands of years or something. And
shocking, right? Yeah.
Act as if we're going to just go ahead and break that down right away at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
It's insane. But the thing is, I think for the most part, they use that as a way of establishing levers of power and levers to manipulate men. And they fail to recognize that when men yield to that manipulation, they lose respect for the same men that they're trying to henpeck.
Yeah. One of the ways they do it is by crying. They don't like something that you're doing, or they want you to stop doing something that you're doing, or they want you to start a new behavior. And if you refuse to give them what they want, usually what they'll do is they'll start crying. And what I've noticed about a woman's tears is the only time you can trust them is when they're by themselves. Give you an example. Let's say you break up with a girl, she's hurt. She hasn't left her house. She hasn't eaten much. You hear from her sister or cousin 4 days later. Oh, like she's been a mess, man. You got to talk to her. She hasn't left her house. She's been crying nonstop. That you can trust. That, you can look at that situation and be like, damn, that girl actually, she really loves me. A lot of women will just like go out and hop on the next guy that she can get on at a nightclub that very night. I've seen both in my life. I've seen women hop on the next guy's D, and I've seen women spend days crying. I don't think that you can trust her tears in front of you, because it's often and I don't think they do this intentionally to manipulate us, but I think that it's just what happens. It's like they don't get their way and then they'll cry about something. And I remember Tristan Tate said this once in a podcast interview, and I thought it was very amusing. He said, women do this because they got no hands, because they can't fight. So they sort of fight in the emotional realm, and they'll just like drop the tears sort of thing. And, it's one of those things that might ruffle some people's feathers watching this right now, but you tell me where the lie is.
No, there's no lie there. And it's interesting you bring up the Tristan Tate quote, because if you peel back the onion of just nice conversation between men, we as men understand that depending on how the conversation can go, we could end up going to blows. And that's part of what keeps us as men respectful to one another, is we understand that the domain of the physical is within us. And the women just do not have that, generally speaking.
Yeah.
So that's why they'll go ahead and get offended about something, and then they'll go and backstab the person.
Yeah.
And They'll assassinate their character. They'll use shame, guilt, and insults all over the place because they have nothing else to rely on.
100%. Yeah.
And it's interesting when we talk about these female influencers, a lot of them are the same way. You go ahead and give them any kind of pushback, and their immediate reaction is, "Who hurt you?" Or,
"Oh yeah, who hurt you? You're gay. You have a small dick." Whatever it happens to be, because they don't have a rebuttal to the argument. They don't have a logical fighting point. So it's like, they just go directly to what they know, which is, fighting in the emotional realm, which is fine. I mean, it is what it is. And that's why, once you understand these concepts and these components of these intersexual dynamics, you just don't care. And that upsets them too, right? I mean, when they don't get a reaction, when you don't get angry, that's one of the other things that really gets under their skin too. It's unfortunate.
Well, I think it's really funny because it's so useful, right? Yeah. When they are getting upset and you don't yield to them and you're doing what's right for you and the family, later on later that night, they're usually going to come back and be like, "Yeah, I was a mess, my bad." And I find that happens very often in my own marriage, is when my wife is huffing some crazy, I'll just look at her and be like, "No, we're not doing that. That's just not what's going to happen." And then she'll huff and she'll puff. She'll go away for a couple hours. And then later on, she'll cuddle up to me and then try to make things up to me. And I'm like, "Babe, it's all good. Don't worry about it. I know who you are and how you are. It's all good. Don't worry about it."
Yeah, a wise woman knows when to apologize and admit that she screwed up. It's like, you'll never get the level of accountability that your friends will, give you, or, even yourself. Like, I'm super tough on myself, obviously. But if you can get half the accountability, half the ownership that you apply to your own life and your own standards, you're doing pretty good with a chick in that sense.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because accountability doesn't look the same way a lot of times. It isn't what they say because they don't communicate directly. They communicate indirectly. So it'll usually be currying favor or behaviors where they try to get close to you afterwards. And that's their way of saying that they're sorry, because they're trying to make you feel better about a thing rather than actually addressing the truth for what it is oftentimes.
Yeah. Give me 1 minute, Mike. I think I got an eyelash in my eye. I'll be right back.
No, you're good. Yeah. Let's see. Great. Elon Musk, filthy jockstrap. Actionable info, previous stream. When will your super chats be enabled? Thank you for your service. Oh, awesome. So I just met the first tier of monetization earlier today, and I went ahead and applied for that. So super chats should be available as soon as Google sends me the thing in the mail, so that I can go ahead and finalize it to be a part of the YouTube partner program. So that was something that happened this morning. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. Apologies for that, man. Sorry.
Oh, dude, you're good. I get it. It's rough. Now, speaking of long-term relationships, one of the things that you had brought up was this triangle of IDs: proximity, familiarity, and exclusivity. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, your viewers got their seatbelts on?
Go for it, man. Let it rip.
Yeah, because proximity and familiarity are kind of straightforward. Most guys will kind of accept them. It's like, proximity is how close she is to you on a day-to-day basis, right? And what most guys find when they get into a long-term committed relationship or a marriage, it's like they start spending more time together. And the idea is always sweet. It's like, if we blend our lives, we can save some money and we don't have to travel to each other's house. We can wake up together in the morning together and blah, blah, blah. And it always seems like a good idea. And I thought it was a great idea too when I did it the first time. But what most guys learn after the fact, and any guy that's been there, done that sort of thing once or twice or three times will echo this and be like, Rich is right. The more time you spend around each other, the less you like each other. A lot of the mystery is gone. A lot of the familiarity sort of like builds up. You get very, you get into like a very regimented sort of schedule, where everybody is all the time, what they're up to. If there's a difference in that sort of thing, you become aware of it. Their habits and their isms get under your skin. Oh, I can't stand that he always leaves his socks on the floor. Why can't he put his white socks in the white hamper and his dark socks in the dark hamper? And that never bothered her, before you guys moved in together. So the first two are kind of similar. It's like one is familiar with them, their schedule, and their little isms and stuff, and the other is just like the proximity and the closeness, that you have to them. And I think that distance always breeds a lot of desire. Giving women the gift of your absence is a good idea. And it's one of the reasons why, I don't think I would ever live with a chick anytime in the near future. Or if I did, then there would have to be times apart or sufficient time apart where some of that mystery could build. And then the third itty is exclusivity. And I think one of the mistakes that a lot of guys make is they'll blend commitment to a woman with sexual exclusivity to a woman as well. And this is one of the things that, polygynists, talk about. And I think rightfully so. I think they have a pretty solid angle on it. But this is, through observation and through a lot of studying that I've done with the Evo Psych studies and all the other books and podcasts and things that I've read, is I noticed that when you give women 100% assurance of sexual exclusivity, they don't behave the best. Over time, most guys find themselves giving her a lot more and getting a lot less in return. You can give a woman 100% of your commitment, your love, show up to events and birthdays and, tick off all the boxes in the summer, retreats and the holidays and all that sort of stuff. But only give her 99.9% of your sexual exclusivity. They can't be separated. There are people that are currently committed but not sexually exclusive. There are people that are sexually exclusive that are also not committed. It's been done. It's always been done throughout history. But it's very different for men and women. And I think that once she has that assurance of her owning your D 100% of the time, then something happens to her. And it's like, well, if other women don't want it anymore and he's not potentially going to give it to other women, then it doesn't seem that interesting to me, sort of thing. And I'm not saying those are the exact thoughts or the words that go through her mind, but I'm just trying to summarize it and distill it, because I talk about the three itties in several parts of the book. And the way I sort of explain the book is like, it's like I'll take something and I'll take a picture from this angle. I'll do an aerial shot and I'll kind of take it from this shot, sort of thing like that. And I cover the different aspects of how all these different things work in the different chapters of the book. But the three itties is the one that sort of deals with the components, and more specifically the sexual exclusivity. I think it can be separated and you can have a good relationship with a woman. As an example, some of the most successful relationships and some of the longest standing relationships, especially with top shelf men, have been open or slightly open, or the idea of it being open sexually on their end has existed while she was fully committed to him. And men and women don't operate in the same sense or regard. When a woman truly loves a man, when she adores a man, when she loves a man, most other guys become invisible to her. She doesn't really want to go and sleep with other guys. She just doesn't. She might look at another guy and find him attractive, but she doesn't go and pursue it because she knows that could screw up what she's got with that guy. Whereas I've seen tons and tons of guys who are married, who are in committed long-term relationships, give her the vast majority of his sexual exclusivity, but they still exercise on the side, if you know what I'm saying, from time to time. As long as it's discreet, it doesn't embarrass her, it's responsible. Like they don't want you taking a random woman to the restaurant that you take her to, and one of her girlfriends sees it and takes a photo and, oh my God, look, Rich was at this restaurant with this bimbo. Look at this picture over here, sort of thing. She's like, why were you taking her to our place, sort of thing. She doesn't want you taking vacations with this girl. She doesn't want, a random knocking on her front door and being like, hey, guess what? I got Rich's kid and me. I'm pregnant. Surprise. Those are the sorts of things that they don't want to know about. But throughout history, the guys on the top shelf have exercised optionality sexually and been fully committed to women. Men can do it. Women can't do it. And that ruffles a lot of feathers, but that's the reality of the sexual marketplace.
Well, that's interesting because for the most part, they just don't want to be embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
They don't want it to go ahead and be put into their face for their reputation to be called into question.
Yep.
Right. Whereas there has been this passive understanding that this is a thing among top shelf men since the beginning of time, basically. And it isn't really changing all that much. And so it's interesting because, one thing that I told my wife is, look, you have the right of first refusal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. And I laid it out to her that way. And it's interesting because anytime I go to a trade show for one of my other businesses, like I find that the performance the night before I leave is intentionally notched up a bit for that purpose.
Funny how that works. And doesn't that improve the cohesion of the marriage for you too, right?
I think it's great because then while I'm going ahead and doing the trade show and I get a couple of minutes to just sit down and relax, inevitably, flashbacks come from that. And it's like, man, that's great for all of us.
And I'm not suggesting that you need to exercise the optionality, but I think that the loophole should exist. I think that there should be some competition anxiety in her head that exists, that there are other women that find you attractive, and you may or may not exercise the option to indulge, provided again that it's responsible, safe, discreet. She's not embarrassed by it. Guys can do with that whatever they want to do with it. I'm just telling you what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how much better behaved they are as a result of that. And if you are concerned with the quality of your relationship and the quality of the relationship long term, these are things that you should care about and seek to inspire in the relationship for the benefit of both parties. And that's like the crazy thing is a lot of times people think that it's selfish, but it's interesting because in a lot of ways, you are giving her the benefit of a better relationship.
It's true. Oftentimes the very things that women want men to stop doing or to start doing for their benefit are actually bad for her and the relationship. So when you learn all these insider facts that I talk about in the Top Shelf Man, even though some things she may not like at surface value, it's actually better for her and the relationship at the end of the day.
Sure. And it reminds me of the Beauty and the Beast dynamic, which is basically the archetypal hero tale for women. A lot of times they'll go ahead and find the guy that's making a dent in the universe, that's kind of a bad guy in some ways, and they try to tame him. And then they end up going way too far on the other side and overtame him through henpecking. And then they lose respect for the man that they had these visceral, reactions to back in the day.
Why do people spend tens of thousands of dollars to go on a safari in Africa to see the lions in the wild, but only spend $30 to go to the local zoo to see the same animal? It's because the wild animals are more interesting to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
You cage the animal, they're a lot less appealing to people. And it's the same thing with men. Like once she cages you, which is what she tries to do, you become less appealing to her over time.
Because you're less of a challenge to her. What she wants you to be a challenge. And so that's why a lot of modern women get confused because they think that it's reciprocal. And you were bringing this up about the Danica Patrick conversation where it's like, don't you want a woman to contend with you? Yeah. No, I contend with the world. I go ahead and fight the fight, climb the mountains, slay the dragons, and bring home treasure so that we can have an amazing time together. I'm not here to fight you.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
And they fail to recognize this.
Yeah. And it's wild because it's like you do have to spend a good amount of your time as a guy often having these conversations to a limited degree and aspect. I think once you have the conversation and your position's been stated, you just if it comes up again later on or she's going to cry about it or throw a hissy fit, look, we've covered this. We're not going to have this conversation again. And that's all you need to do as a guy. If you're going to lead the relationship, if you're going to lead the charge, if you're going to be the man in the relationship, if you want her to enter your frame, you're going to have to take certain positions that are going to be nonchalant, that she's not going to like, that might make her upset, that she might cry about, whatever it happens, she'll get over it. She'll get over it. I mean, again, if you're a top shelf man, you're out there putting a dent in the universe and you're of some significance, you've developed renown for yourself. Who is she going to replace you with? What is she going to do?
Right? Exactly. If you're her hypergamist best option, what is she going to do? Most of the time, nothing, especially if you've been married for 10, 15 years. Like at that point, chances are she's past 30 and then she's got kids. So what's the reasonable alternative to this?
Yeah. Hopefully her support network, her board of advisors, her counsel supports that idea. Because I think one of the dangerous things that guys have to be aware of is who are her friends, who is their circle of influence. Because women tend to make, not all women, but a lot of women tend to make many of their decisions based on the counsel of her friends, her sister, her mom, sort of thing like that. And if their narrative is F that guy, he's taking advantage of you, all men are toxic. Like if that's their narrative, then you're going to be up against something that's going to be difficult. So this is, again, part of the vetting process that should exist when you're selecting the kind of woman to invite into your life. Does she see you as her best option? Does she defer to you? Does she follow your lead? Or when you do or say things that she doesn't like, does she go to her friends and cry about it and then come back to you and say, oh, my friend said you were toxic and I can't believe you, and I can do better. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you mind if I go ahead and bend your ear a couple minutes after we're done with this?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and land the plane. I think we've done a really good job of hitting the vast majority of the topic areas. Once again, this is Rich Cooper's Top Shelf Man. This is the second installment of the Unplugged Alpha series. Is there any plans in the works for a third one?
I'm not going to say never. We just finished the audio files, so they're going on Audible in the next day or two, so they should be available within a week. So if you're a listener of books, that should be up soon. But you can get it in print, Kindle, and hardback right now. Hope you guys enjoy it. There's lots of golden nuggets in there.
Absolutely. I look forward to the Audible coming out. I imagine you're going to post about it on X when it does, right?
Yeah, I'll mention when it's available.
Sounds great. Awesome. I also have more from Rich down in the description. He's got a men's group. He's got a website with a lot of offerings. And on his website, you can also find both of his books. Rich, is there anything else that you would like to kind of push in the closing?
No, I mean, you can find everything centrally on my website at richcooper.ca.
Okay. And then do you have any final thoughts for the men in the audience?
Just get the work done, guys. Don't mill on things that you don't like. Lean into the future, get the work done. Nobody cares about men. Only women, children, and dogs are loved unconditionally. Men are only loved under the condition they do something of some value. And that's not me saying that. That was from Chris Rock's stand-up comedy, Tambourine.
Sure. And it's interesting how comedy has so much truth involved.
Yeah, real life, man.
I appreciate you taking the time, Rich, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks, Mike.